Hi, it's Scott Thornton here. It's been a while since I've put anything on YouTube. I've been mostly writing. If you go to either inclusivechristianity.org or the progressivechristian.com and click on the prior messages tab, then there'll be some 22 essays on there, two most recent being Heaven and Hell, A Rational Approach, and God's Love in the Face of Terrorism. What we're going to talk about in this video is the fact that theology is not etched in stone. There is not just one right way to think about God, and that it's actually quite arrogant to think otherwise. I get very excited about debating the merits or the deficiency of particular theologic doctrines. But when I do that, my wife reminds me that theology is basically an exercise in intellectual gymnastics. We tend to forget that ultimately God is a mystery. We all sense that there is something more than what we experience in our concrete existence and what we see around us. We sense that there's something transcendent, something beyond us, yet something that's also a part of us that helps define us. We refer to this presence as God. This God can probably best be understood as an energy or essence or spirit. Imagining God as anything more concrete than that reduces God to being very small. A God that encompasses the entire universe for all of eternity cannot be reduced to a concrete image. Unfortunately, as humans, we cannot relate to the abstract image that I just portrayed. We therefore anthropomorphize God, referring to God as a person. Worse than that, we give him human attributes, our own attributes. It's once been said that we are created in God's image in the Bible. You can turn that around and say, well, we did the same. We created him in our image. The very fact that God is a mystery precludes us from defining the absolute character and nature of God. What we say about God ends up being a reflection of our personal experiences, our life experiences, our spiritual experiences, and our worldview. Yes, throughout time, there are mystical men and women who appear to have an extraordinary ability to connect with that which is spiritual, who give us visions of how they see and experience God. However, these are still just people. Yes, people who may be filled with the divine, but still people with particular life experiences, and people imagining things through a particular lens. The stories of Jesus are told by the gospel writers 30 to 70 years, give or take, after Jesus' lifetime. Each writer draws upon his own life experience and worldview in portraying Jesus. This is why we see Matthew's focus of Jesus as the Jewish Messiah. We have a Jew writing to a Jewish community. And Luke's focus on Jesus as the social justice prophet. Each writer paints a picture of Jesus and the image of God that we see through Jesus based on his own bias and agenda. A good example of this is the change that we see in the nature of Jesus over the 50-some years during which the Gospels were written. In the earliest synoptic Gospel, Mark, Jesus is predominantly portrayed as prophet, healer, and teacher. Approximately 50 years later, the last Gospel, John, emphasizes Jesus the divine, the one who connects us to God. At the time of Mark, the Way was still predominantly a Jewish sect, only beginning to spread to the non-Jewish community. By the turn of the first century, when John was written, Jesus' followers were now emerging as a distinctly separate religion, Christianity in direct conflict with Judaism, paganism, and non-Orthodox followers of Jesus, such as Gnosticism. Therefore, it becomes important, critically important, to emphasize Jesus not just as prophet and teacher of a way of living that leads us to God, a way also taught by the Jewish prophets, but instead he becomes the way to God himself. Essentially, every Christian doctrine was likewise developed within a particular historical context by a group of people with a very specific worldview. It is unbelievably arrogant to think that traditional Christian doctrines on subjects such as the atonement, or heaven and hell, or the Trinity, developed in ancient times, are the only ways for people to imagine God and the importance of Jesus in leading people to God. It totally blows my mind when I see ultra-conservative churches state with absolute certainty that one must believe X, Y, and Z about God and Jesus in order to belong to their community, and even more so to be acceptable in the eyes of God. It is exceedingly myopic to think that our faith tradition is the only one that can lead people to an experience of the mysterious, transcendent entity we call God. It is much more sensible that multiple paths lead people to an experience of this mystical God. Surely it is entertaining to debate theology. I find theology fascinating and probably read in excess of 1,000 books from all kinds of perspectives on the nature of God. But I would never presume to think that my conclusions are the only answers to be found in the study of God. And I presume that the way people will imagine God 1,000 years from now will be quite different than I do. I'm not quite sure why people are so frightened about the evolution of our perception of God. I guess there is a comfort for people to have life written in stone, as you will, but that is not the nature of life. It is not black and white, but rather filled with all shades of gray. If we can embrace life's complexities, it becomes more vibrant. Similarly, if we can embrace the mystery of God, rather than trying to lock everyone into specific, rigid doctrines, we might just experience a vibrant spirituality that connects us to each other and God in ways that are beyond what we could have ever imagined. Thanks.